Hi, welcome to another video of this channel. I made a community post asking which game you wanted me to cover next, and most people chose Samsara Room, so that's the game I'm covering in this video. In 2013, a small flash game was created, which was the original Samsara Room. In 2020, Rusty Lake remade Samsara Room for their 5th anniversary. The original was made 2 years before the Rusty Lake game studio had even been founded, so it isn't part of Rusty Lake's storyline. However, it still has its own story, which I hope to discuss in this video. The new Samsara Room takes place at the end of Roots, during the long process it took for William to be reborn as Laura. We play as William, as some kind of spirit without a physical body. The room appears to represent a space between lives. The room has a phone, which was also in the original. In the original game, the phone acted as a guide for the player, guiding them towards enlightenment. This phone guide was in Cube Escape Seasons as well, although there it's most likely Laura's future self. In Samsara Room, it probably represents a sort of spiritual beacon, guiding the protagonist towards enlightenment, like an internal voice. In the original version at least. The phone in the remake seems to be a little different. The phone in the remake seems to just make random jokes. First it says, "Enlighten me," which causes matches to appear. This is a play on words, as matches literally produce light. But the phone could still be some kind of beacon, guiding William towards his next life, via strange puns. Jokes aside, it's important to understand what enlightenment actually means in Rusty Lake. In the world of Rusty Lake, enlightenment means reincarnating in a higher realm of samsara. Samsara, one of the main themes of Rusty Lake, is the Buddhist cycle of rebirth and the 6 realms you can be reborn into. I've already mentioned Deva, the realm of the gods, and Asura, the demigods, the animal-headed people like Mr. Crow. Mr. Owl might actually be an Asura, not a Deva, like I previously said. There's also Manusa, the realm of the humans, and Tiryagoni, the realm of the animals, which in Buddhism were seen as being ignorant and unaware, driven by simple instincts. It was a lot harder for them to be reincarnated as something better because of this. This is reflected in Rusty Lake. In Roots, when the dog drank the elixir, instead of becoming an asura, it stayed as an animal. This is because it was unaware of the cycle of samsara, not knowing or caring that it was drinking the elixir. Then there's Preta, the realm of hungry ghosts, which are called corrupted souls in Rusty Lake. And finally, Naraka, or Hell, the realm of suffering. In Rusty Lake, it's depicted as a red forest. With all this in mind, in Rusty Lake, enlightenment refers to upgrading realms. That could mean going from human to demigod, human to god, or in Samsara Room's case, going from a corrupted soul to a human. William somehow goes through the window of the room and then returns as a fish. I don't think he physically transformed into a fish though. The whole room and weird purple space could represent some area outside of the physical world, similar to the Buddhism concept of bardo, a sort of limbo between realms. In this case, William's spirit could be drifting and cycling through different forms in this liminal state. However, I think the original represented something different. While the remake is just an artistic representation of the process of rebirth, the original seems fully metaphorical, being a metaphor for the cycle of samsara itself. My interpretation of the original is that the room symbolizes a life, and when we go through the circular opening, this symbolizes death. When we return to the room as a different animal, this symbolizes reincarnation. The character goes through this process many times, symbolizing the constant cycle of samsara. So while the original was a metaphor for life, death, the limbo between lives, reincarnation, and the entire cycle of samsara itself, the remake is a representation of just the limbo between lives. At any rate, in the fish room, the telephone returns for a second hilarious joke. It says, "Let it sink in," and the paper boat literally sinks into the room. In the original, to go from room to room, we have to arrange 5 items in a pentagon pattern. This was a puzzle that also made its way into Cube Escape, the lake. In both the original and the remake, the room after the fish room is the Gecko room, where everything is upside down. There's the 3 paintings from Paradise, the Cave, and Paradox. There's also a book titled The Circle of Life, a reference to the Samsara cycle. Afterwards, we find the 3 triangle keys and open the clock, and just like in the original, a naked corpse comes out of it. In the original, this was probably nothing more than a reference to death, as well as a play on the term grandfather clock. In the remake, the body is William's corpse. They did try to make the dead body less jarring, as it was foreshadowed earlier when we saw his hand emerge from the clock and use a knife to stab himself. Although it doesn't make much sense in this context, it also serves as a reference to Cube Escape paradox. In the remake, there's a new puzzle where we have to use the heart, fish and gecko rooms in order to get the worm. In the original, the worm was obtained in an explosion of black moths. Moths are something we see a lot in Rusty Lake as well. They seem to represent negative auras and whatnot. William then drifts to the worm room, which has many similarities to the original. The image of the carpet is the same in the remake as it was in the original, and when we enter the dead body's mouth in the remake, the image used there is also the same as the one from the original. Inside his body, we see a red forest with trees, similar to the depiction of the Naraka realm of Rusty Lake. This is something we saw in his body in Roots as well, so maybe the realm of Naraka or Hell is a sort of internal landscape. While the bottom of the lake is also a forest with a hellish appearance, I don't think that it's hell. In Rusty Lake, I believe hell is supposed to be a mental state, a state of mental instability like we see with Robert and Laura. I don't think it's a physical place, it's more like an internal suffering of the mind, the spirit, the consciousness. In Underground Blossom, which uses train stations to symbolize stages of Laura's life, not only is the stage of Laura's life where she was most depressed represented by a red tiled station, during the section where we see the nightmares she had right before she committed suicide, the nightmares are represented by the red forest. Another layer of evidence is that in Cube Escape Seasons, when Laura was going insane and becoming corrupted, she had a vision of hell. It's clear that Naraka isn't a physical location, but a state of mental instability. Anyway, inside William's mouth, we can obtain a shrimp and reach the shrimp room, a secret room that wasn't in the original, but there is a reference to the original. We use a pencil to draw a key on a paper and a real key appears on the paper. This was a puzzle from the original. Unlike the fish room, where all the furniture was freely floating around, in the shrimp room, everything is on the floor. Even the mirror and the cabinet are on the floor instead of the wall. This is probably referencing the fact that while fish float freely around in the ocean, shrimp spend most of their lives at the bottom of the sea, sticking to the ocean floor. Even the phone is on the floor instead of on the table. It says the past is never dead backwards.
The past is never dead.
Anyway, the drawers have been replaced by a large shrimp underneath the Sanskrit word samsara. William's corpse is inside the shrimp and he still has the elixir in his mouth. I find the elixir to be interesting. By drinking it, people can switch samsara realms without even needing to die and reincarnate. They can just immediately become enlightened, quite different from how the cycle normally works in Buddhism. Although perhaps the rules of reincarnation still apply. If switching realms should require death, maybe what the elixir does is it lets someone bypass the death by having someone else die for them, letting them skip ahead to the rebirth without having to die. If people really can become asuras just by dying and reincarnating, maybe that's what happened to Mr. Bat and Mr. Toad from the hotel. They could have been naturally born as animal-headed beings. However, this seems unlikely. We don't see any evidence for Rusty Lake having any kind of karma system or anything, and it seems quite different altogether to how samsara worked in Buddhism. While it could be true that the elixir requires a death because naturally reincarnating requires a death, it seems more likely that one person needing to die is just for the sake of balance. One person moves up, the other moves down. Either way, in the shrimp room we collect air, fire, water, earth, a reference to the alchemy scene from Roots. Then we see a strange scene, Rose with her golden timepiece and Laura as a young child. I don't think this means anything though, it's probably just a teaser for Underground Blossom. Whatever the case, that's everything we see in the shrimp room. Next, we go to the bird room where there are no walls. This also happens in the original. I believe that in the original, this represents the full enlightenment of Buddhism, Nirvana. In Buddhism, this is when the mind sees beyond the boundaries that keep you in the cycle of samsara, seeing the way out. This could very well be what the walls of the Samsara Room disappearing symbolizes in the original. But even though we can see outside the room, the character is still inside. Since the room represents life, this could represent the first stage of Nirvana, where even though the mind has seen outside of the cycle, it is still alive and inside the body. But the phone helps the character to leave the body altogether, achieving the full Nirvana. It gives us the code for the clock, 8:25, a time which appears both in Roots and the remake, emphasizing its importance. Then the character leaves the room again, representing leaving the body. But instead of coming back into the room and being born into the cycle again, the room dissolves into pieces of paper. This is the second, final stage of Nirvana, to die and leave the body, and also to completely stop reincarnating, escaping the cycle of samsara. In Buddhism, this is also a form of enlightenment. The phone could even be an inner Buddha. However, in the remake, of course, this is not what happens. It's almost the exact opposite, since its entire focus is being reincarnated, and the book in the drawers even refers to rebirth as becoming enlightened. In the remake, the bird room has a lot more content. The phone says, "Rise up," referring both to rising up on the samsara wheel, but also making another pun, as afterwards a hot air balloon literally rises up. Then we go through different times of day, starting in the afternoon, then going through the evening and into the night. Then, after the night, the morning is reached. This is a metaphor for William's journey, with the sun rising in the morning being a metaphor for rebirth. Just like William going through different animals before being reincarnated, the day has to go through different phases before reaching the morning. There are other, smaller references to rebirth, such as young birds being hatched from eggs. In the morning, a stork appears, swallowing the 4 animals that William temporarily became, and produces a baby, which are often associated with storks. Then, William finally settles into a proper form, becoming a baby, Laura Vanderboom. She is shown leaving the room, but this time it doesn't represent Nirvana, it represents rebirth, symbolizing how she leaves this weird liminal state and returns to the physical world. Finally, we once again see the scene from the end of Roots, Rose at the lake holding Laura as a baby with the words "The End" appearing. This confirms that the game is indeed about William's reincarnation. Although it doesn't reveal much more of the lore, it was just a small free remake for their 5th anniversary. The concept of exiting and entering a cube also paved the way to the creation of the Past Within, their biggest project. And that's my interpretation of Samsara Room and its canon remake. And if you want to see the next part in this series, subscribe so you won't miss it. Make sure to leave a comment if you have any theories of your own, and thanks for watching.